Thank you for joining our podcast today, What Investors Should Know About Bitcoin. My name is Chris Casey, and I'm pleased to be here today with Paul Rosenberg. Paul, thanks for being here.
Oh, a pleasure.
Now, Paul, I've always found you very interesting because, I think you're definitely what fit the definition of a polymath. And currently you're the founder of Crypto Hippie, which is a firm which provides encrypted email, chat, and voice connections. But you're also the author of A Free Man's Perspective, and currently you write that under the column, Friday column for Casey Research as A Free Man's Take, which is excellent, by the way. If people want to sign up for that, they should definitely sign up at Casey Research. But the most relevant for today's discussion, I know you were giving presentations on digital currencies like 10 years ago or so, and well before the rise of these current cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, which I assume is kind of the latest evolution of digital currencies. So let's just start with the basics. What is Bitcoin? Everyone hears about Bitcoin, maybe the blockchain. What is it, and what are cryptocurrencies?
Sure. A cryptocurrency, let's just start there, is a currency that's built upon cryptography. It's just a currency that uses cryptography for safety, to make sure that it can't be counterfeited, to make sure that it can't be easily stolen, things like that. Bitcoin is a really unique, innovative type of digital currency. The easiest way to think of it is just to think of it as coins, which is why I'm sure they chose that name. It's just little pieces of digital code that are useful as coins. And like regular coins, you can have ones, fives, tens, 20s, whatever. Bitcoin is divisible. You can get down to it's divisible down to 8 decimal places. But it's just digital money. It's computer money. It does not exist anywhere else. It's not based upon an underlying commodity. Now, that doesn't mean that it's based upon absolutely nothing at all, because it requires quite a bit of work to make these things, to create Bitcoins, and also the value is also based upon what we call the blockchain, which I'll explain in just a second, which is a very powerful, very interesting type of technology. So it's not based upon nothing. It's just not based upon something you can hold in your hand. By
the way, I've always found it humorous that people have a hard time grasping the concept of a digital currency, and yet, if you look at the money supply in the United States, M1, which is one measurement of money supply, which includes currency itself, is at about 2.8 trillion, and of that, currency is but a minor piece. But MZM money supply, which is the metric that the Federal Reserve favors, is more like 13 trillion. So right there, you're looking at at least a 13-to-3 ratio of so-called digital currency to actual money.
Right. Dollars are, if you divvied up all the dollars in the world, most of them would be electronic, which is what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is all electronic. But like I say, it's not absolutely without any backing, because it's backed by, again, the considerable difficulty in creating Bitcoins, and also the very, very impressive and important technology of the blockchain. Let me jump to that and explain what the blockchain is. Let me start with, you do not have to understand the blockchain in order to use Bitcoin. To use Bitcoin, all you need is a wallet, which is a little computer program. It's trivial to download. It's trivial to use. And it's just, you need a wallet, and then you have to get Bitcoin. We'll talk about that more later, I'm sure, which can be done several different ways, and it's not particularly difficult. So what I'm going to explain now is really cool and really interesting, but you don't have to know this to use the stuff. So the blockchain is the way that Bitcoin actually operates underneath the hood. If you can, those of us who can remember, years ago they used to have things going back hundreds of years called ledgers of title, where somebody would bring in, they started it years ago when they brought in sailing ships full of cotton or tea or whatever it was in those days, and they would have a list of how many bales of this and how many barrels of that. And they would have this list and then distribute it once they got to the other side and say, so many barrels are now owned by John Smith. So many bales are now owned by Susan Smith, or whatever it might be. And they kept this list, and then you could change the list over time. You could scratch out Susan Smith and add Marvin Jones, and change this list as time went on. They could get quite long, and every line had to be signed by the authorized person, so it was legitimate.
It sounds fairly similar to what the recorder of deeds would do for real estate.
It's very similar to what a recorder of deeds would do. Same basic idea. This is what the Bitcoin blockchain is. The differences are really two. One, that is each line is not signed by a third party. It's secured by cryptography. So rather than having the recorder of deeds sign his name, you own the key that unlocks that transaction. You own the cryptographic key that unlocks it. What it does is, doing it this way makes it that there doesn't have to be a third party with control over your money. You own your own keys. You control your own money. Now, that's one difference. The other difference is that this ledger of title is distributed. It exists on, I'm not sure what the proper number would be these days, but let's say 100 or 200,000 different computers, maybe 1 million different computers around the world. And that's the genius of this thing, the computer aspect of it that's genius, is they figured out how to get this program to exist on hundreds, any number really, it could be millions or 10 millions of machines, and to sync itself all the time. So this ledger of title exists everywhere at once. So people say, well, can't you hack Bitcoin? Well, you'd have to hack 1 million computers in the same night. Sounds a little rough to me. When you hear if Bitcoin got hacked, well, it means that one particular company that was using Bitcoin or storing Bitcoin got hacked. It's the same thing as saying, oh my God, there's a bank robbery, short the dollar.
Right. No one implicates the actual value or usage of the dollar based on a bank robbery,
Exactly. But since Bitcoin is new and people don't know what it is, it's very easy to frighten them. And there's a lot of people that make a living, get attention, promote whatever they're doing by fear, because humans are badly susceptible to fear.
So based on this blockchain technology, I'm not sure if you use the term, but you hear it frequently with Bitcoin, it facilitates peer-to-peer transactions.
Right.
And also, not only it's not anonymous, but pseudonymous. Can you address both of those concepts?
Sure. When they say peer-to-peer, what they mean is there's no authorized middleman. Everybody in Bitcoin, everybody who uses the blockchain has equal right to the blockchain. It's between individuals. You don't have to send it through, a central bank. You don't have to send the money through Visa or MasterCard. If I'm going to send money to my cousin in Panama, I just send it to my cousin in Panama. There's no middleman. It's peer-to-peer. I send it directly to him. So that's peer-to-peer, and the other question was?
The nature of it is being pseudonymous.
Oh, that's important, yes. Bitcoin is not anonymous. People have often said, oh, Bitcoin, anonymous digital cash. It's not anonymous. Everything in Bitcoin is tracked. Bitcoin is the most transparent currency that has ever existed on planet Earth.
Unlike the dollar or other fiat currencies, which are inherently anonymous.
Yes. Cash money in your pocket is inherently anonymous. Bitcoin is the most transparent, trackable currency that has ever existed. Every Bitcoin, every fraction of a Bitcoin that's ever existed is fully tracked. The question is, how? And when you create a Bitcoin or you spend a Bitcoin, what it's tracked to is a string of letters and numbers. 17, 19, 23 characters, whatever it is. It's a string of A, B, 3, C, Y, Q, Z, however. So if you always use the same digital identifier, this string of numbers, then it's very clearly tracked what you're doing and what you're doing on the blockchain, who you're buying and selling with. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can use a brand new crypto identifier for every single Bitcoin you buy and sell. So when people are looking for privacy, that's what we suggest that they do, so they can, it's who is Q3Y69? I don't know. Nobody knows. And if it's only one transaction, how can you really tell?
Right.
So it's a pseudonym, but there is a name, and it is tracked.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a pseudonym, and it's fairly simple to make tracking it to a particular individual pretty rough.
So I'm with a wealth management firm, WindRock Wealth Management, and we have clients that are interested, and they're not the 20-year-old college student who's considering Bitcoin, but middle-aged, wealthy, affluent Americans who are interested in Bitcoin and have heard about it. So for an investor, it's really right now, I assume you would agree, it's a speculation. This thing could go to zero down the road, or it could really go to the moon. But for that latter scenario to play out, I assume it would have to be widely adopted as a currency down the road to really increase in value. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Bitcoin, it doesn't have to be adopted by the central banks and the big banks like that. Let me explain how this works. Bitcoin's price is pretty much a function of supply and demand. If people like Bitcoin, if they want to keep it, if they want to use it, the price goes up. If they decide they want to get rid of it, they're not so sure, the price goes down. I am really confident that the price is not going to go to zero. Even if all of the major banks, the European Central Bank, the Chinese bank, the Russian bank, the Fed, if they all come out against Bitcoin, which more or less they're doing because Bitcoin eats their lunch, they're tending to do that. But every time something cracks, every time Argentina can't pay its bills and the exchange rate goes nuts.
Belarus, there's a number of countries.
Belarus,
right?
Cyprus a couple of years ago. People go into Bitcoin because Bitcoin transfers money worldwide, seamlessly, instantly, and more or less for free. So if all of a sudden currencies are having difficulty, you can't get to your ATM, you can't do this, people will continue diving into Bitcoin. Also, if you try to send money overseas, Western Union or those, it's outrageously expensive, especially for people who don't have a lot of money. You get the guy from, let's say we're here in Chicago, so let's say we're talking the Mexican guy who's up here working and wants to send some money back to his family. He's got $200. His wife needs it because she has to buy some clothes for the kids for school. Well, how's he going to send? You send $200 for Western Union, you lose 20% of it. Bitcoin, boom, it's there. It's there in 2-3 minutes, and $200 of $200 arrive on the other side. So this isn't going to go away. People, say, well, they're going to make it illegal and they're going to do this. Yeah, well, how well did they do with all the marijuana dealers? They never went away. And you're talking about sending money back home so your family can eat. The guy who's doing that really doesn't care whether it's legal or not. So it's not going away.
And like you mentioned, it is purely, it's fantastically portable, which is, I guess, when Aristotle kind of defined the various attributes of money, it's divisible, homogeneous, durable, and portable. And here we have something that meets all those qualifications as money, and yet historically gold and silver, in fact, I'm 44, even in my lifetime, gold has been used as money.
Oh, yeah.
Gold and silver historically have met those criteria, and that's why they've been used for millennia. And it occurs to me that Bitcoin meets all those characteristics as well. If anything, though, it's even better with portability than gold or silver because there's nothing physically to transport.
Right. Bitcoin is magnificent for portability. Try to carry silver and gold across an international border. You're lucky if they don't throw you in jail. Bitcoin, boop, 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 and a couple clicks and it's there. The only question with Bitcoin is its durability. If they start shooting people for using Bitcoin, the number of people using it's going to go way down. I don't think that's going to happen, but you you can't say never.
And we do seem like we're at a strange, stage with the adoption of Bitcoin, because here we have something that was literally pennies, traded for pennies, just a few years ago. In fact, I don't think we mentioned this, but the origin of Bitcoin really is traced back to, is it 2008 with a white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto?
Right,
Okay.
A white paper in late 2008, and then the blockchain opened in January of 2009.
Okay, 2000, right. And for 10 Bitcoins were the first items transmitted at that point. The price then ran from pennies to up to $1,200.
Right.
As of today, this is January 16th, 2015, is around $210 the last I looked. So it's gone up quite a bit, but it's still resilient. It's still worth several $100s despite a lot of the negative press, despite regulations from China and Russia historically, despite, like you mentioned, these probably over-exaggerated breakdowns in security at various exchanges.
Right.
You'd mentioned, if they crack down, what other type of regulations can you see coming down the pike for Bitcoin?
Well, I see two different attack vectors, if you will. One is from the central banks and their friends, because, again, Bitcoin eats their lunch. Bitcoin does everything theirs does and better, and without them in the middle skimming from it. So Bitcoin essentially puts them out of business if it really succeeds in a big way. So we're going to have had and will continue to have difficulties from that direction. The other difficulty is from Bitcoin's supposed friends and people who want they want legitimacy. They want to be accepted by the hierarchy of the existing system rather than being outsiders. And Bitcoin is very clearly an outsider technology. It may not always be, but certainly that's how it has begun. So we have people who want to be accepted by the existing power hierarchy of the Western world. And they're willing to say, gee, maybe we convince everybody to water Bitcoin down. And let's make sure that everyone is required to file Know Your Customer forms and all of that type of stuff, which greatly reduces the utility of Bitcoin. They're going to say, well, we just want to make sure no bad guys use it. Well, we want to make sure no bad guys use anything. Ideally, no sane person wants, murderers and bad guys using their stuff. Well, what about dollars? The bad guys use dollars and euros and yen? Of course they do. Or they use a telephone company? Of course they do. You can't protect like that. You kill whatever you try to protect it if you do it that way. So again, we have the two vectors. One is organized force, and the other is people who are kind of sucking up to organized force.
And despite the fall in price, and despite, I guess, some negative press, although people are, I think, warming up to the concept of Bitcoin over the last couple of years, it's shocking how many major retail outlets and stores and websites are accepting Bitcoin today. I mean, I looked over this morning just kind of the latest of who's accepting it. And I know publicly, Overstock came out about a year ago, I think, but now you have Kmart, Home Depot, you have Microsoft with their Bing website. I mean, it's shocking how many firms are accepting it.
Well, it's a better deal for the firms. If you use Visa or MasterCard, you're losing 2 or 3%. Even if you're a big outfit, if you're a small outfit, it's more. You're losing 2 or 3% off every sale. For somebody like Walmart, 2 or 3% might be their entire net. Mm-hmm. And so you use Bitcoin, you keep the 2 or 3%. It's a big deal. For somebody like grocery stores that have thin margins, that's a really big deal. So Bitcoin is not going to go away. And the price comes up, the price goes down. Okay, that makes it difficult as a speculation. But I would be really surprised to ever see it go away. It's not. It's really not going away.
And one thing we didn't hit on, you had mentioned that, well, like anything, the value of Bitcoin is a function of supply and demand. We didn't really talk about the supply, though, because unlike a fiat currency, and all a fiat currency means is that it's being used by decree, right? We're forced to use it. It has value because of that, solely because of that. As we're seeing in Japan, as we're seeing really in the entire developed world, they're increasing the money supply like crazy,
yes.
of several orders of magnitude. But if you look at Bitcoin, as I understand it, there's only a maximum of 21 million that can ever be brought into the marketplace.
That's correct. That's written into the programming itself. I'm not sure of the number that are currently in existence. It would be 15 or 16 million, I think. Maybe.
I'm guessing if anything, that's on the high end. Yeah, I think I remember seeing 11, 12 just a year ago.
It was 11 or 12 a couple years ago, and whatever it is now, it's in the teens, probably low to mid-teens.
And I imagine, and it's also being more difficult to bring them to achieve the 21 million. It's becoming more difficult.
Correct. Now, this can get really technical, and again, it makes no difference to actually using it. It's utterly unnecessary, but it's a real cool operation called Bitcoin mining, and the difficulty goes up and down. It's fascinating stuff, but it matters nothing for actually using the currency.
So it would almost be the equivalent of the Federal Reserve, and of course this didn't happen, but if in 1913, if they were somehow had a printing press that could only make $21 million, and in fact it became slower the more they printed until they achieved that. Is that the equivalent of
Exactly, and money would still be worth something. You know, I'm old enough to remember my Uncle Dave came to Chicago in 1903 with a nickel in his pocket, and he ate on the nickel. You know, he ate, and he got a job where he made $0.25 a day. He was rolling. Dave was happy.
That was some time ago, considering the dollars lost. You know,
but I knew this man. You know, I knew him.
Well, you hit on a couple of themes here as far as Bitcoin also being a disruptive technology, right? So you mentioned payment systems, you mentioned remittances. You know, the immigrant who's trying to send money to his family. What other areas do you see not necessarily at risk or subject to a change because of blockchain technology or Bitcoin itself? And I was thinking it would apply to anything where you have information stored electronically, where you'd like a public record, and you don't necessarily have to have a third-party custody, so it facilitates the peer-to-peer aspect of it.
Correct. Bitcoin is tremendously flexible. With little additions or little modifications to it, you can make it a ledger of title for houses, for deeds, for any sort of physical property, and it's utterly unforgeable, and it will exist for however many decades or millennia that the blockchain or record of the blockchain exists. It's a wonderful permanent record. There's a thing now that you can do with it is to create smart contracts that enforce themselves, where you can get let's take a real simple one to explain. Let's say you and I make a bet, and I bet you 2 Bitcoins. I'm feeling like a big spender. And I bet you 2 Bitcoins that I know who's going to win the Super Bowl in a few weeks. We make the bet. We just plug in this little piece of code and say, pick up the price from the ESPN feed. And on Super Bowl Sunday, as soon as the game's over, the money is immediately released to either you or me. Whichever it is, we both pay into, and it just releases right away to either you or me. Now, you can do that with very complex commercial agreements, which is really very cool.
Well, at the very least, every single fantasy football league out there who has that one guy who won't pay will want to do that, right?
Right.
Well, that's fascinating. Tell us about how people actually can go about it. You had mentioned like a wallet. You know, what websites? How do you go about actually, if you're not going to mine it, which I assume most investors are not interested in?
No.
How do you go about buying it? I know that there were rumors there would be an ETF down the road. Those things, it sounds like that's kind of been stalled, at least for the time being. How do you actually possess and buy a Bitcoin?
Well, what a lot of people do is simply sell things and take payment in Bitcoin. Companies that I manage do that. They will accept payment in Bitcoin and then build up a certain amount of Bitcoin and then do whatever with it. You can buy it from your friend. Let's say if I needed some Bitcoin, I had a friend that at one point was going to buy or sell some Bitcoin. I said, well, you can give me some money, give me what it was, euros or dollars, I don't remember, and I'll send you such and such Bitcoin. So that goes on all the time, and then there are online exchanges and ways that you can do it online. There are companies that will do it for you.
And you want to name just a couple that people can check out?
Oh,
without obviously endorsing anything.
Yeah, I'm not current on them. BitInstant was a big one. I'm not sure if they're still working. I'm not really up to date.
Coinbase, is that?
Coinbase is a good one. That's correct. Coinbase always was good. There are quite a few.
Well, what else I've noticed now, obviously we're here like you mentioned, we're in Chicago. There's at least 3 ATMs now. In fact, there's one about 18 blocks from us, where if we wanted to go get Bitcoin, we could walk down there right now and go do it with some dollars.
No kidding. I didn't know we had them here in Chicago.
So it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent. And it's incredible. We have a number of stores obviously adopting it. We still have Bitcoin that, although off its highs, it's still worth quite a bit. Mm-hmm. It's fairly easy for investors as a speculation to look at this through a number of different channels to buy it. And this is not just us sitting here talking about the possibilities. I just read that in the venture capital community, this is like the hottest industry right now. I think it was about $100 billion was invested last quarter in Bitcoin or blockchain type technologies because they view it as a disruptor for a number of things.
Oh, it absolutely is. It has so many different functions. I like Bitcoin as an insurance policy. And if what happened in Cyprus or what looks like it's about to happen in Greece happens here or wherever somebody lives, you've at least got Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You might not be able to get any money out of the ATM, but as long as your computer or smartphone works, you got Bitcoin. I like it for that.
Right. We keep talking about Bitcoin, and we had mentioned cryptocurrencies in the beginning, Bitcoin being the most famous. It's in many ways kind of the prime mover in this space. What other cryptocurrencies are out there, and do you see anyone kind of overtaking Bitcoin, or is it just too early to say?
It's too early to say for sure. The number 2 currency is probably Litecoin, which is fine. It's just a variant of Bitcoin, the same idea, made a different way. Bitcoin's not perfect. It's got some issues with mining. Litecoin was an effort to improve some of that the mining issue with that. There are a bunch of other ones, too many to keep track of for me.
Sure.
But one of these days, somebody will come along and have something better than Bitcoin. I don't know when that will be, and when that happens, slowly but surely, people will change over. Maybe they'll use Bitcoin for long-term storage and use whatever this new one is for, daily spending. I really doubt Bitcoin's going to go away, but I wouldn't be surprised if someday something came along that was better for certain applications, at least.
Great. Well, thank you very much. If people are more interested in Bitcoin or other investment-related themes, they can certainly check out my website at WindRock Wealth Management, WindRockWealth.com. And Paul, can you mention both your companies here, Crypto Hippie, and also the writing you do for KC Research?
Sure. First is Crypto Hippie. We do internet privacy. We give you your privacy back on the internet. CryptoHippie.com, CryptoHippie.com. And the other is my newsletter. It's Freeman's Perspective, freemansperspective.com. It's a monthly subscription letter, and then I write also the Friday Daily Dispatch for KC Research at kcresearch.com.
Well, Paul, thank you so much.
My pleasure.